Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Wheeler. Assemblyman Yeager. Chairman Ro Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Assemblyman Ellison present when he arrives? I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Today we will be hearing 3 bills. All testimony will be limited to 2 minutes, and everyone is encouraged to submit their testimony in writing to be included with the record of today's meeting, which will be uploaded on Nellis. Those attending virtually and in person are encouraged to register promptly in Nellis to attend, however and whichever way you prefer. Please remember to select your position on an agenda item, whether you're in support, opposition, or neutral. You may submit your opinions or testimony online up to 48 hours after each one of our meetings. For those joining us in person, please remember to keep your mask on and observe social distancing protocols. To reach our committee, you may email us at asmgi@asm.state.nv.us. We have 3 people in the audience today. Thank you so much for joining us here in person. The committee is eager to hear from you, and we will start with Senate Bill 285, and welcome Senator Harris to Assembly Growth and Infrastructure. You were here last week, but I happened to be on the other side of the house testifying, so I missed you, so it's good to see you here in person.
You missed a good bill. That's okay. All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Ro Moreno and committee members. I am Dallas Harris, representing Senate District 11 in Clark County. I am presenting Senate Bill 285 in its first reprint, which deals with bike safety. Also here to present with me is former Nevada State Senator Justin Jones, currently Clark County Commissioner Jones. I believe he's available by video. So it's impossible to have a hearing on a bill about bike safety without remembering the tragic and needless deaths of the 5 bicyclists on US 95 last year. While the changes in Senate Bill 285 will not solve the problem of impaired drivers, the first part of the bill makes some changes to the rules of the road to help bicyclists and improve safety. During the pandemic lockdowns, both nationally and internationally, people have rediscovered bike riding for both exercise and recreation, as well as a commuting option. In a response to the increase in bike traffic, cities in the U.S. and around the world have closed streets to car traffic to make them safer and more bike and pedestrian friendly. This is great news for the environment and for public health. But the question is, how do we keep this momentum going? What can we do to keep people using bikes for commuting and recreation and do it safely? Surveys and common sense tell us people are more likely to use bikes if they feel safe, and they feel safe when there is a dedicated bike lane or bike path separated from the road. So the second part of this bill is a nudge towards more and safer bike routes. Now let me just walk you quickly through the bill's provisions. Section 1 expands the curriculum in driver training courses to include the rules of the road and laws relating to bikes and pedestrians. Too many drivers are not familiar with the rights of bicyclists and pedestrians, and informed drivers make the road safer. Section 2 clarifies that it is legal for a motor vehicle to cross over the center line, even in a no passing zone, in order to pass a bike or e-scooter, unless, of course, it's unsafe due to oncoming traffic, road work, or other unsafe road conditions. Section 3 clarifies that bicyclists and e-scooters do not have to ride to the far right of the road if there are surface hazards or objects in the way, or if the travel lane is too narrow to safely fit both a bike and a vehicle. These proposed changes to our bike laws were based in part on model legislation from the League of American Bicyclists and have been used in other states. Before I go through sections 4 through 7, I need to give you some quick background on a program known as Complete Streets. Complete Streets may sound vaguely familiar, and the reason why is every time you renew your vehicle registration, DMV asks you if you want to contribute $2 to Complete Streets. That $2 donation goes toward matching federal funds and dates back to 2013 when the legislature enacted AB 145, authorizing NDOT and local governments to adopt the Complete Streets program. At least 35 other states and literally hundreds of communities have enacted Complete Streets policies. Just Google it if you don't believe me. These programs focus on the construction and retrofitting of streets and roads to support mobility and safety for all users, including children, older persons, persons with disabilities, pedestrians, bicyclists, as well as all forms of motorized traffic. And Complete Streets policies operate at all levels: federal, state, local, and at all stages: planning, designing, and construction. The concept encompasses bike lanes, bus lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, medians, and all the improvements that make roads safer regardless of your mode of transportation. So, in SB 285, Sections 4 through 7 update the Complete Street statutes to re-emphasize the need for NDOT, the cities and counties, and the 2 regional transportation commissions to continue to work toward incorporating bike and pedestrian facilities into new roads or when retrofitting existing facilities. The bill also makes a subtle update to the list of users to be more inclusive. Please note that I use the words continue to work toward because Complete Streets policies are currently in use all over Nevada. We just need to do more. Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But before I do so, I'd like to turn over the remainder of the presentation to Commissioner Jones, who'll speak to the importance of the bill at the local level and to the biking community.
Thank you so much. I know we were having a little difficulty getting the commissioner on. Commissioner Jones, are you there yet?
I am on video, Madam Chair. Just trying to see if I can start my video or not.
Okay. Well, we hear you loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Justin Jones. I currently serve as a Clark County Commissioner, as Vice Chair of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, and also as Chair of the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition. I want to thank Senator Harris for allowing me the opportunity to work with her on SB 285, something that I hold near and dear to my heart. SB 285 was drafted in consultation with cycling and pedestrian safety advocates and reflects model language from the League of American Bicyclists and the National Complete Streets Coalition. As Senator Harris described, SB 285 accomplishes 3 important objectives to improve safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and other roadway users. First, the bill adds a requirement for drivers' schools to include instruction on the rules of the road relating to pedestrians and cyclists. It clarifies the rules of the road when it comes to cyclists and motorists in the roadway, specifying circumstances when a cyclist may ride in the roadway for safety reasons. And finally, the bill updates provisions relating to complete streets to ensure that all users of the roadway and of all ages, including pedestrians and cyclists, are considered in the design of roadways. These proposed changes are consistent with Clark County's recent efforts to clarify its rules of the road relating to cyclists and to prioritize consideration of complete streets principles. The RTC serves as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Southern Nevada. As MPO, RTC has also prioritized multimodal transportation, complete streets design elements, funding for multi-use paths and infrastructure, and cycling and pedestrian safety. SB 285 aligns with the RTC's priorities also. The Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition oversees the Regional Open Space and Trails Program, which plans connected bike and pedestrian trails throughout the South Valley. SB 285 would advance the goals of the Regional Open Space and Trails Program. I wear a lot of hats, but my favorite head covering is my bike helmet. Like so many, I love to just get out there and ride, as I did with so many cyclists this past Sunday, to celebrate our Safe Ride program with the Southern Nevada Bicycle Coalition. But to be honest, it's been a little concerning after the recent tragic deaths of 5 cyclists. In addition to the recent cycling tragedy, there are just too many pedestrian deaths in Nevada, all of which are avoidable with better infrastructure, education, and enforcement. SB 285 won't solve all these issues we face when it comes to safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and other vulnerable road users, but it is an important step forward. And I'm just grateful that Senator Harris was able to put this bill forward, and grateful for your time, and would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sorry we couldn't see your face. It's been a while since I've seen you in person, so thank you for testifying today. Members, questions? I think we'll start the questioning out with Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Harris. First, I really sincerely have to say thank you for bringing this bill forward and for working with Commissioner Jones on this. As an avid cyclist in my community, the roadway is something that I share often, over 1,000 miles last year alone. My question is relative to the Complete Streets program, and I have long been an advocate and proponent of Complete Streets and often ask questions when we do our planning relative to where were complete streets in the planning process of many of our roadway construction items. I'm curious to know if there's been any conversation regarding a modified complete streets. And the reason I bring that up is having met with advocates in my district who are very interested in roadway paving and reworking. Now, sometimes a complete street can be a bit intimidating in that it is for buses as well as other mobility transportation as opposed to secondary routes. So I'm just curious to know in this process as we move this bill forward, has there been any conversation or consideration with regard to modifying the complete streets expectation to encourage cyclists or pedestrians to be more removed from traffic?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. To you through Chair Monroe Moreno. I've had discussions with the Department of Transportation as well as the Southern Nevada Regional Transportation Center. Is that what the C stands for in RTC? Commission, Regional Transportation Commission, and have assured them that this bill would not substantially change the Complete Streets program as it stands today. What I'm trying to do is further incentivize them to think a bit more expansively. One of the issues I ran into is the fact that there are a lot of projects kind of already underway. And so I was able to confirm that this would not require them to go back and do replanning, but really should be put into place thinking about moving forward. I think you bring up a great point, and at some point, if I have another bill, maybe next session, to reform the program completely, I'd be more than willing to look into that. But thus far, this program's been mainly local driven. As you can see in the statute, our reference is fairly sparse here in state statute, right? It just says adopt a policy and carry out projects as part of the Complete Streets program. And so I'm open to looking into ways that we can improve the program overall. But this bill does not go into that much detail on that program.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your efforts on behalf of all cyclists and pedestrians. Thank you for the good work.
Thank you, Assemblyman Levitt, and then we'll have Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, if I'm reading this correctly, this is a mechanism to utilize a complete street in a more effective way. Is that what we're looking at here? I'm trying to make the connection. If you could help me out there, and I have a question. If you can help me with that, real quick.
I'll do my best, Assemblyman. To you through Chair Monroe Moreno. Thank you so much. So, as far as the Complete Streets program, just keep in mind that's one out of a couple of pieces in this bill, right? But in relation to that, you can see in Section 4, what we're doing is we're just trying to make it a bit more explicit, a bit more clear, right? To the extent practicable, the projects have to integrate bike lanes, bicycle routes, facilities, signs, designs, in design, plans, construction, and maintenance of roads. We're giving a little bit more direction on what the Complete Streets program needs to take into consideration. It is my understanding that in most parts of the state, they're doing this fairly well, but that may not be the case uniformly across the state, and so we're making that a bit more explicit. And it is my hope that this, along with the additional education in driving classes, and along with the additional guidance on when it's okay to cross lanes and when it's okay to ride in one lane, will altogether lead to safer roads for everyone who uses them, not just bicyclists.
Thank you for that clarification. So just for transparency, I've worked for the RTC for 13 years and have touched complete streets in every, in every manner that you could probably, from outreach to being Boulder City Parkway, which was previously US 95, is the largest complete street in the state, and it just completed a year or two ago. But my concern is that complete street, Boulder City Parkway, is not utilized very effectively for cycling traffic. They don't tend to use it all that much, and so although I have a very soft heart to the Complete Streets project, having dedicated a lot of my life to it, forcing or mandating that we do that, sometimes, like, unless we can narrow down what if applicable means, or to the extent possible means, because having a contractor have to do a certain thing on a certain street where it's in their mind may not be applicable or may not be possible, or to the extent possible, but is there somewhere in here that we can kind of narrow that down so we have a better understanding of that?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Levitt. I would be more than happy to put on the record that there is no intention for this bill to require anyone to go back and dig up any streets that are already built. So to the extent practicable does not include having to start a new project that you were not already planning on doing. I'd also like to note that really this is about design and planning and keeping these folks in mind when you are designing and planning and then eventually constructing the projects. There is no requirement that you ultimately decide it makes sense to put a bike lane here. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, right? Whether that be because there's not enough biking traffic or because maybe you'd have to take someone's property and create a whole new right-of-way. I think that, as you mentioned, the RTC and other entities are well-versed in the ability to decide when it makes sense to add in a little bit of extra roadway for a bicycle lane and when it may not, and I will leave that to continue to be in their hands.
Thank you, and thank you for the answer to that question. We can't always put into legislation every specific part of everything that might happen, but putting it on the record what the actual legislative intent matters for future legislators that come through this building when we're not in these seats. So I appreciate your doing that. Next, we'll have Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for the bill protecting our streets and our bicyclists. Quick question regarding the language in here, and I see that it's existing language as far as what's electric bicycles. I'm just kind of curious as we move, vehicles to more electric things. I realize that there's probably a very distinct difference between a motorcycle and a bicycle, but now with motorcycles potentially not having motors and now having electric or battery powered, how would those vehicles, or, how would that play into the bill?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Miller. I've got good news for you. If you just hang on, we've got a bill on electric bicycles. Ms. Fisher in the back there is going to run through what we're proposing on regulating electric bicycles in a sense, right? Creating separate classes, and that would allow them to fit into existing roadway laws. And so what you would see is the Bill 383 would work in conjunction here, and where electric bicycles, based upon how fast they go, where they're allowed to be used, whether it be the sidewalk or the road, would continue to be true once we pass this legislation.
Thank you. Next, we have Assemblyman Ellenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. I apologize for being late. I got stuck on a conference call, but I do have a few questions, and I'm kind of glad you did address under Section 4, population, we're 100,000 and above. And I do have a couple questions right at the moment, it won't have a physical note, but eventually, as they're building roads, to expand it, then it would. And has NTOT come up with any concerns or fears or whatever? Because right now, it costs about $1 million a mile to build a road. And so if you add onto that $1 million, it's going to start spreading out. But I do like this and how it shows and around schools and stuff like this. And I think that's a great, because they can actually do that right now by striping, by going to 1 versus 2 cars or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that they can do. But I think that once they get out farther away from the schools and get into roadways and stuff, I wouldn't ride a bicycle or my motorcycle in Las Vegas. So, I mean, I just don't do it. But could you address some of the concerns that I did have? But I think this was very informational. So.
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Ellison. For the record, I did ride my motorcycle in Las Vegas.
Oh, did you?
I did for quite some time. It is quite dangerous, but that's a whole nother discussion, I think, that we probably need to have. I'm hoping that with this bill, we can get more folks riding their bicycles on the road in Las Vegas and doing so safely. As to your question about the fiscal impact, it is my understanding that NDOT is one of the leaders in the state already working in the Complete Streets framework and taking this into consideration. And in my discussions with them, they did not see any fiscal impact, as this bill does not require them to, let's say, put a bike lane on every road moving forward. Really is just about taking these things into consideration, planning a bit more deliberately to take all of the different modes of transportation into consideration.
Well, thank you. And I think you're going to address some of the concerns that the people have out there on riding their bikes. And I've got a big bike, and I don't even use it on the freeway anymore. If driving in town, that's about it. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Ellison. I think, the driver safety portion of this bill is a key piece to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Assemblyman Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and more of a comment than a question. And I just want to say, first, Senator, thank you for bringing this forward. With my time at Metro, we suffer from great roads and nice 6-8 lane roads in Las Vegas with 45-mile-an-hour speed limits that sometimes people go much further than that. Crosswalks are, at each intersection, and we lose a lot of people to pedestrian accidents in Vegas, and we've worked hard on the engineering aspect to improve our roadways. And recently, you mentioned, the bicycle accident that occurred out on US 93 down there. A guy that used to work with me was in that group. Thank God, he is okay, but it's unfortunate that we lose lives on our roadways every year. Go back to Officer Don Alberts that lost his life at Red Rock Loop. We've made some improvements since then. We finally put in a bike path out there. So this is really forward-thinking legislation. I really appreciate you bringing forward, and I'll fully support it.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I got a couple other bills that you might want to support too.
She's just throwing it out there.
I'll hold out on those till here.
Assemblyman Watts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a quick question. In some of the sections where you're updating the definition of the Complete Streets program, just as one example, Section 4, subsection 4, you included in the bill movers of commercial goods, and I was wondering if you could just provide a little bit detail on why that was added, along with some of the other clarifications that were contemplated.
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Watts. This bill was, as I mentioned in my opening testimony, partially derived from model legislation. And so I wanted to be as inclusive as I could when it came to thinking about all of the users on the road. And movers of commercial goods is a large percentage of the folks on the road.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, I thank you, and we will go to testimony. And we'll start here in the room. Is there anyone here in the room wishing to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 285?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Susan Fisher with McDonald Carano testifying today on behalf of People for Bikes, and that's an international organization, a trade organization that is that represents bicycle manufacturers, bicycle vendors, the parts and pieces that are the OEM products that go onto bikes afterwards. We do support SB 285, and we appreciate Senator Harris bringing forth this bill and also accepting a couple of amendments that we made over on the Senate side, some suggested amendments that are now incorporated into what you have in the revised bill. We are very pleased that she included e-bikes in the bill. The proposed changes are very positive, and they would align Nevada with what most organizations consider the best practices in where to ride statutes. Therefore, we support it. I will just mention for Mr. Ellis's sake, when we're talking about e-bikes, we're not talking about electric motorcycles. There are certain wattage capacities that e-bikes fall under, and that's what we're working on with another bill that you'll hear here today. So e-bikes do not include the razors, they don't include the unibikes that look like a skateboard with one wheel, they don't include electric scooters or electric dirt bikes. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in the room who wish to provide testimony in support? Seeing no one else here in the room, we are going to stay in the room, finish the room before we go to Zoom. Is there anyone here in the room who would like to testify in opposition for Senate Bill 285? Seeing none, do we have anyone here in the room who would wish to provide testimony in the neutral? All right, seeing none. Then we'll move to our BPS staff. Do we have anyone joining us by Zoom who would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 285? And it doesn't look
To
like we-
testify in support. My apologies, Chair. I was trying to connect via the
That's
phone line.
okay. I kind of jumped ahead of you, so I apologize.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 285, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 155. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of SB 285. Providing funding for complete streets was a priority of the Nevada Conservation League during the 2013 session. We strongly believe that expanding complete streets programs will have great benefits to our communities and our state. SB 285 will allow our state to move towards creating a safer environment for pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, and transit riders. Expanding bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure will also encourage people to leave their cars behind, reducing traffic and pollution. Overall, we believe this bill will help make our communities more safe, accessible, and enjoyable for everyone. We'd like to thank Senator Harris for bringing this bill forward, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 442. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 442. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of testifying. For the record, my name is Dr. Deborah Kuhl. That's Deborah. Last name is Kuhls. I'm a trauma surgeon, and I practice at University Medical Center in Las Vegas, which is Nevada's only level 1 adult trauma center and Nevada's only pediatric trauma center. I would like to refer to the committee members to a handout that you should have access to that is entitled Complete Streets Policies Nevada, Nevada. The top half of that handout is based upon national data, and based upon that national data, we see that Complete Streets policies decrease the risk of death for both cyclists and pedestrians, and those are significant. In the state of Florida, they estimate that over 3 decades, 3,500 lives, pedestrian lives, have been saved. In the upper left corner, you'll see a map of the U.S., and you can see that Nevada is one of the states that adopted complete streets. The bottom half of the handout focuses on Nevada data. Pedestrians who died or were discharged to hospice sustained very severe or moderately severe injuries, and that in the bottom half is in kind of the upper
30
left
seconds.
Part of the graph. The dark portion indicates very serious injuries. We also see a very similar trend in cyclists. In the bottom to the right, there's a graph that gives the age distribution. What's important is that pedestrians have 2.5 times greater risk of death and 1.4 times greater risk of needing skilled or nursing inpatient rehab compared to other road users. And many of these never return to their prior quality of life.
Ms. Cole, excuse me.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. If there's more to your testimony, if you would send that to us, email that to us, we can get it to all the members on our committee. And I thank you so much for joining us today with your comments on this bill.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next caller?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 562. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Anne Macquarie. That's ANNEMACQUARIE. I'm a member of the Clean Transportation for All team of the Toyabe chapter of the Sierra Club. The Toyabe chapter strongly supports SB 285. I personally have been advocating for biking and walking as safe, sustainable transportation modes in Nevada for over 20 years, starting as the founding president of Muscle Powered in Caution City. In fact, I testified in favor of the first Complete Streets bill in the Nevada Legislature in 2013. I invite you to look around our capital city today with its bike lanes and bike paths, complete streets retrofits, including wider sidewalks and bike lanes, traffic calming features, and more, to see how far we have come in that time. But it's still critical to continue to build a multimodal transportation system statewide in which biking, walking, and other inexpensive, healthy, low-carbon emitting travel modes are safe, supported, and encouraged. We understand that more people of more varied ages and abilities will start or continue to walk and bike when safer streets are provided through programs like Complete Streets. We especially appreciate the addition of language in this bill specifying that complete streets should be designed and maintained for people of all ages and abilities. As our population ages, it is important that Nevadans can continue to walk and bike for exercise and transportation within an infrastructure that accommodates and supports all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 116. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Heather Fisher, HeatherFisher.
I am the president of Save Red Rock and also owner of Las Vegas Cyclery. I am calling to support SB 285 and to express my appreciation for the work that was done in putting this bill together. It's nice when a bill that's written for particular public, which in this case is vulnerable road users, is counseled with those actual road users. So we appreciate that. That is really great. We like that it is about awareness and education rather than restrictions. So we're all for it. And there's a lot more bikers out on the road, a lot more hikers, a lot more people out enjoying the great outdoors, especially since the pandemic. And so they are here, and we can't close our eyes and pretend they're not. So this is really important. I love how this bill revises driver's education to include laws relating to cyclists and pedestrian safety. I like how it clarifies the 3-foot move over law, which a lot of people don't even know about. So passing another bill just helps to bring awareness and education to that cause. It also clarifies that the collision between a motor vehicle and cyclist is a violation of the 3-foot move over law, and it provides provisions for clean streets. We are supportive of all of these aspects of this law, and we appreciate the consultation of vulnerable road users when creating a law for road users. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fisher. Next caller.
Chair, we have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone on the line wishing to provide testimony in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Senate Bill 285, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition.
Thank you so much. Do we have any callers on the line who would wish to provide testimony in the neutral stance?
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 285, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 653. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
What? Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the rest of the Assembly Goals Committee. My name is Dora Martinez. I represent the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. I'm in neutral only because I didn't have much time to read the amendments, but I do support some of the points on the bill, the multimodal advantage for all types of people, every type of people. As a person who is blind and walk a lot with a service dog, I just want the bike riders to know how to interact when coming across a person who cannot see. When they say on your left, you know, they need to understand that they're on my left, not their left, because I had some collision. So thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ms. Martinez. Thank you for joining us and for your comments. Do we have any other callers on the line who wish to provide testimony in the neutral?
Chair, we have no further callers in neutral.
Thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end. I would ask the presenter of the bill, do you have any final comments for the committee?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to thank the committee for their time and for their consideration. I'm more than happy to, as always, continue the discussion with each and every one of you if you have any additional questions. And I look forward to seeing you all at the work session.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your optimism, but it is a great bill. And with that, we will close the hearing for Senate Bill 285, and we will open the hearing for Senate Bill 288. I believe we have Mr. Walker who will be joining us virtually. Maybe a few people join us virtually on this bill. As soon as you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Monroe Marino. Good afternoon, members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee. We thank you for this opportunity to discuss Senate Bill 288. I'm Sam Wimpy, for the record, Director of Government Relations and Public Policy at Motional. Before we talk about the bill's specifics and the policy challenges, I think it would be helpful to provide a brief overview of who Motional is and the role of the vehicle operator in our autonomous vehicles. After that, our advisor, Matt Walker, will walk through the section by section. Motional has been fortunate to achieve several key company milestones and indeed industry achievements right here in Nevada. Our history in the state began in 2018 with our Las Vegas Technical Center opening and followed later that year with a public autonomous vehicle pilot with Lyft in Las Vegas. That pilot is the world's longest running public autonomous vehicle service. And in 2020, we serviced our 100,000th ride on the pilot. It has led to critical insights into the consumer experience and has helped build operational knowledge across vehicles, infrastructure, and utilization. To support this increase in R&D, our facility in Las Vegas has now grown to over 250 employees. Safety is our number one priority. When we talk about our vehicle operators, these are Motional employees who undergo weeks of training on how to oversee an autonomous vehicle, in addition to defensive driving courses and regular refreshers. After each software release, they must understand the nuances of how the vehicle is expected to operate. Because of how involved the vehicle operators are with the platform, these individuals need to be Motional employees, even when monitoring an autonomous vehicle on a TNC network such as Lyft's. We've been extremely fortunate to have had a great relationship with our government partners at all levels, from Las Vegas and Henderson to Clark County and with the RTC. We're honored for the opportunity to discuss the future of transportation with the committee here today. Because we have the biggest footprint of any autonomous vehicle company in Nevada, we're on the cutting edge of experiencing how the legislative and regulatory regime in Nevada applies to autonomous vehicles on a day-to-day basis. As I explained, our vehicle operators need to remain employees even as they monitor vehicles used in commercial pilots, such as the one we have with Lyft. This type of challenge we're discussing, the payment of a vehicle monitor of an autonomous vehicle, is not one that was anticipated as the rules were developed. It was assumed that there would be a step change. Once the technology was ready, everything would be fully autonomous. Instead, everyone is finding out now that it is much more of a gradual transition. It may require vehicle monitors in some situations for years to come, even as other fully autonomous vehicles are deployed in certain situations. The proposal we are discussing here today resolves some of those challenges and helps Nevada continue to be a leader in the future of transportation technology. We're very proud of what we have built in Nevada, and when it is safe to do so, hopefully very soon, we'd be honored to show all of you around our facility and our fleet operations. I will now turn it over to Matt Walker, who will step through the section by section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And good afternoon, Chair Monroe Marino and committee members. My name is Matt Walker, for the record, and I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon on behalf of Motional to walk briefly through a section by section of Senate Bill 288. Section 2 of Senate Bill 288 defines a monitored autonomous vehicle. This differentiates an autonomous vehicle service where a vehicle operator or safety engineer is present from a fully autonomous service that would fall under Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 706B. Section 3 of the bill defines an autonomous vehicle provider. Motional would fall under this definition of an autonomous vehicle provider as they own the technology of the autonomous taxi service and hire the safety engineer who provides the in-person monitoring of the vehicle. Section 4 defines a safety engineer. This is the person behind the wheel of an autonomous taxi and builds the bridge between the current definition of driver in 706A and the driverless environment of 706B. Section 5 allows TNCs to enter into partnerships with autonomous vehicle providers. This construct is important because it retains the existing regulatory oversight for the TNC while allowing for the best practice model of the technology partner providing the technology and safety engineer. Section 5, subsection 2 allows for the safety engineer to be employed by the autonomous vehicle provider. The current regulatory and statutory construct does not allow anyone other than the TNC to pay drivers. Section 5 makes it clear that safety engineers being paid by the monitored autonomous vehicle provider is not a violation of existing statutes or regulations of the Nevada Transportation Authority. Section 19.6 ensures that monitored autonomous vehicle safety data is reported to the legislature and that insurance sufficiency reports made to the legislature by the Nevada Transportation Authority for 706A licensees include monitored autonomous vehicle providers. Lastly, Section 22.3 clarifies that a monitored autonomous vehicle provider is responsible for providing insurance coverage for the vehicle in the same manner as a TNC driver and is responsible for providing information to law enforcement in the case of a crash, including whether the vehicle was logged onto the TNC at the time of the incident. In conclusion, I would just like to say that we initially worked with Senator Harris on a much narrower change to 706A to ensure that Motional paying its employees did not violate anti-kickback provisions that require drivers only be paid by a TNC. As a result of many conversations with Asher Killian with the Legislative Counsel Bureau, who has extensive experience with Chapter 706A and 706B, as well as dialogue with the Nevada Transportation Authority commissioners and other TNC stakeholders over the past several months, the result is a much more robust and stronger draft. We greatly appreciate all the time and expertise of all those involved in the development of Senate Bill 288. And with that, I'll conclude and stand ready for any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Members, any questions? Assemblyman Watts?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I had a couple of hopefully quick questions. One, I have had the opportunity to see some of these technologies being deployed, and it is very impressive and excited to see these things continuing to progress. So I'd just like to start by saying that, hopefully we don't end up in these types of situations, but if there were a collision or an accident to occur, how do the provisions of this bill handle responsibility for such an incident, given the unique kind of situation where there'll be autonomous technology in effect, but then also an engineer or a trained person in the vehicle monitoring it as it's in use?
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Motional, and thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for the great question, because it's really important that this be clear on the record. For purposes of insurance, in the case of a collision, the safety engineer is functioning as the driver, and the technology monitored autonomous vehicle technology provider will be providing the insurance that would typically be associated with a driver in a TNC platform. As a backstop for these incidents, the TNC itself also carries a very significant insurance policy, and that policy would supplement any coverage of that primary insurance covered by the driver. But Sam, did you have anything else you'd like to add to the record on that?
Thank you, Sam Wimpy, for the record. I think all of Matt's points, spoke to the issue at hand very clearly. This bill is designed to promote autonomous vehicle innovation and development in Nevada. It doesn't touch any of the existing liability or insurance requirements. It does clarify them, just to make sure that as we have monitored autonomous vehicles, there are no gaps in the existing requirements. I think the existing requirements promote financial responsibility by AV developers as well as by TNCs, requiring them to carry substantial amounts of liability insurance. And this bill further clarifies those requirements when testing with a monitored autonomous vehicle.
Thank you for that. So just following up, but making sure that I'm clear on this. So essentially, the same framework would apply that currently applies to TNCs that are not deploying autonomous technology. And so, regardless of what happened, whether ultimately with that person conducting monitoring, the responsibility would ultimately lie with them. And so then the same coverage requirements that exist for TNC drivers, and then the same backstop coverage required by TNC companies is essentially what is being applied in the case of a monitored autonomous vehicle provider. Is my understanding correct there?
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Motional. Again, Assemblyman Watts, thank you for the question and opportunity to clarify. That is correct. I wouldn't want the committee to walk away with the assumption that only those state minimums are carried by Motional. There are very significant insurance requirements in 482A, including a minimum of a $5 million policy for any autonomous vehicle company that's deployed and doing testing on Nevada's public streets. And so there certainly is additional coverage out there. But in the case of a traditional fender bender, you are absolutely correct. Motional would be carrying that policy that we typically associate with the driver. And for purposes of insurance, the safety engineer would be the driver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this forward. I got some briefings on the bill, and it seems pretty clear cut. I just had one quick question. You define in Section 4 what a safety engineer is, and I don't believe this is your intent, but I just like to put it on the record. It's not your intent that this person be a licensed professional engineer that would be regulated by the State Board of Professional Engineers and Surveyors, correct?
Matt Walker on behalf of Motional, for the record. Assemblyman Roberts, thank you for the question. That is correct, and this was a subject of probably much more debate than necessary, but vehicle operator, safety engineer, there's many different terminology, and this is ultimately what we settled on as most reflective of the role of the safety engineer in the vehicle, and certainly do not intend to conflate it with any professional licensure that other engineers may carry in the state.
Thank you for the answer. I didn't think that was your intent, and just want to get it on the record. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me.
Thank you so much for that. Just to be clear, if there was an accident, minor fender bender, or a person crossing the street and was hit by this vehicle, who would they go after for remedy? The engineer sitting in the car, or the TNC company that owns the car or deploying the car, or both?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Moreno. Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Motional. I'll have Sam Wimpy also chime in on this, but essentially in the case of a fender bender, and I believe Section 22.3 outlines some of the timelines and actions here. The safety engineer is going to make the insurance information available to any law enforcement that may respond to the accident. Any lawsuit that results, whether it's for personal injury or damage to another vehicle, would initiate with the driver, in this case insured by Motional, and would of course have the supplemental insurance and secondary insurance coverage of the minimum $1.5 million policy from the TNC that's operating in partnership with Motional. But Sam, I don't know if there's anything else to add there.
Thank you for the question, Chair Monroe Marino. Sam Wimpy for the record. The only additional thing I would add here is that because these are still going to be monitored autonomous vehicles, the driver is the driver. Once you get into the kind of fully autonomous systems and the driver is defined as the software system and the technology, I think you start to get into some different situations. But for all intents and purposes, the driver, the individual monitoring the autonomous vehicle, would be considered the driver in any situation where there's involving an accident. Although, the actual facts and circumstances of a given fender bender would obviously determine, the flow of some of those things, but that would be the individual that would be submitting the insurance paperwork. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the answer. And I just have one other question, kind of piggybacking on what Assemblyman Roberts had asked. In Section 4, where you have the definition for safety engineer, could you tell us how you determine that it should be engineer and not operator? By him asking that question to make the distinction about what is an engineer and what's not an engineer, did you think of any other term that could have been used instead of the word engineer in that section?
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Motional. Since I already gave you the committee my thoughts, I'll let Sam jump in and see if there's anything else he can add from his experience in other states and around the world.
Thank you, Sam Wimpy, for the record, and thank you for the question, Chair Monroe Marino. It's unfortunate there is some confusion with the terminology there. I think this is such a new industry that a lot of these definitions are in flux. It is a definition that is used in other jurisdictions. It's one we've encountered in Singapore as well, where we also have operations. So we felt it the most appropriate to continue to apply it. The point that these are not licensed engineers the same way that would be regulated for civil engineers and others in that field makes sense. However, these individuals are highly trained, and they do go through numerous weeks of training, and there is internal certifications that they continue to go through even after they've done their initial onboarding, just to make sure that they are stay fresh and are up to date on all the best practices when it comes to being a safety engineer.
And Matt Walker, for the record, Madam Chair, if I may, I would just add that there's other nomenclature like vehicle operators, but then you run into some confusion about operators versus operating in the case of a traffic incident. And so we really did spend quite a bit of time with LCB, and this is what we landed on. But I certainly think that there's not a standard out there internationally that we could point to in terms of the labeling of this employee.
Thank you so much for that answer. Members, any other questions for our presenters? Assemblyman Miller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. When these vehicles when they are operating with the TNC, how are the engineers or operators paid? Are they paid per ride? Or are they paid for the entire time that they are operating the vehicle?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of Motional, thank you for the question, Assemblyman Miller. Sam, would you mind taking that one?
Thank you. Sam Wimpy, for the record. Assemblyman Miller, thank you very much for the question. I think what you're getting at here is actually the fundamental challenge that was kind of what got this bill started, is that under the current regulatory scheme, the drivers, if a typical TNC, if you were to hail a Lyft or an Uber, they're contract workers, they're paid by ride. Makes total sense in that situation. For our situation, when these are monitored autonomous vehicles, these are our employees, and they're full-time employees of Motionals, because of all the reasons that I just previously outlined with regards to the in-depth training that they go through. So when it comes to monitoring autonomous vehicles, Motional pays them. They are paid a full-time salary. There's healthcare benefits and all the other benefits that go along with being a full-time employee. For the particular pilots we have been operating, they're not paid on a per ride basis. There is a transaction between Motional and Lyft, and I won't get into that, but for the purposes of driver pay, they are paid as full-time employees by Motional.
And Matt Walker, for the record, Madam Chair, if I may just chime in, that tips are also not an interaction that these safety engineers have with the customer. So it truly is just their salary, and they're not compensated based on whether a ride is more profitable or tips or any of the other transactions you might typically think of in determining driver pay for a TNC.
Just one follow-up, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So have you all seen the cost to the consumer? Is it higher or lower based on these operators being full-time employees versus contracted drivers?
Thank you for the question. Matt Walker, for the record. Sam, if you could take this one as well.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. That's a very good question. Sam Whitby, for the record. I can't speak to, Lyft is a separate company. I can't speak to their pricing. So I can't answer in specifics. The intent here is the user experience, I should say, when an individual is getting a ride in one of these vehicles, they open up the Lyft application and they have an opportunity to opt into this pilot. And should they choose to opt in, there's a chance that they get matched like any other Lyft ride to an autonomous vehicle, and it is, they're not charged a premium or substantially lower price as far as I am aware. So this is very much a, as you can probably understand right now, with the fact that there are safety engineers behind the wheel and they're paid as full-time employees. The primary reason for us doing this is not profit generation. It is very much it's safety and making sure that these vehicles are operated as safe as possible and allowing the public to interact with autonomous vehicles. So that doesn't really factor as much into the decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Walker. And, oh Lord, I'm going to say his name wrong. I can't see it very well. Mr. Wimpe, for your presentation. I'm still having a little bit of a hard time separating the roles. It still appears that the safety engineer in an emergency situation, they still will jump in and control the vehicle if there is a technical problem, if the software blows and, computers, and something happens. We are still, that safety engineer then becomes the driver of a T&C vehicle. You don't feel that there's an issue here with that? That seems like a very fine line to sort of straddle. And I know that the pay structure is separate and different and all of that. But it still remains that person at the end of the day will have the responsibility for the safety of that vehicle to ensure that vehicle gets to its destination regardless. And so if you can just sort of expound on that a little bit.
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Emotional. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. I think that this question kind of shines a light on much of what this bill is attempting to do. I think that when 706B, which is the autonomous vehicle chapter in Nevada revised statutes, was formulated, it was assumed that once a vehicle was technologically advanced enough to be autonomous, that there would be a hard transition from 706A service to 706B service. And I think that, as Mr. Wempe pointed out in his previous remarks, we're seeing whenever there's a software upgrade, whenever there's a new public route made available, whenever the speed limit that the vehicle is allowed to travel under is increased, those are all trigger points, not just now, but well into the future, where we're going to see a safety engineer return to these vehicles for a specified amount of time until the safety of the public can be ensured. And so I think that your question kind of points to the fact that this bill builds a bridge between 706B and 706A. In terms of the role of the safety engineer, how often they intervene, and what their role is, and kind of how their role overlaps with the driver, I'll let Sam maybe speak to that because I think he can cover that a little more efficiently than I can.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, for the question. Sam Wempe for the record on behalf of Motional. Yeah, it's an interesting role that this individual has. I would like to just, for the record, say that the safety engineer, they don't just become the driver in the event of a takeover. They are the driver. They're responsible for being the driver the entire time. There are many situations where our vehicle operators may take over the vehicle that has nothing to do with our technology. They're going to be monitoring the actions of other users of the road as well. And if they start to see something that may be unsafe, perhaps someone veering a little bit too close to the vehicle or some other unsafe behavior on the roadway, they're going to take over anyways, just to, and to be absolutely certain that everything will be handled as safely as possible. So for the purposes of this bill, the this individual, the safety engineer, will continue to be the driver at all points. This is not a situation where there is a kind of an on and off switch for when they're the driver. They're always going to be fully attentive. And in fact, that is one of the things that we really have to train all of our safety engineers to be able to do, is how to remain extremely attentive to the vehicle, even when the vehicle appears to be doing everything correctly. There can be a certain amount of fatigue to that, and it requires a tremendous amount of training to make sure that the vehicles continue to be monitored in a safe manner.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that response. I guess this is where I'm just a little bit flabbergasted. So initially, you said that there would be a temporary time that the driver would be here, because now you're really wanting these vehicles to be autonomous. But yet, the driver or the engineer at this point, per your testimony, Mr. Wimpy, has to be attentive at all times while that person is in the driver's seat. So when do you expect to have this transition where these vehicles are truly autonomous, meaning no one is in the driver's seat? Or is that ever expected to be? Do you always believe that there will be this sort of mash-up relationship between TNCs and autonomous vehicles, where we will have this difference, and that Motional will always have someone in the driver's seat, but that the ride will be booked and paid for through the TNC platforms?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, for the question. Sam Wimpy, for the record, representing Motional. I think this challenge we're facing here with like the transition, it is a it's not a clean one. And the way that Motional thinks about it is that there is going to be situations for many years, I think, where it's going to be much more efficient for there to be a human operator, but not an autonomous vehicle at all. There's going to be certain roadways where it's just extremely difficult, and it will always be more efficient, or for many years be more efficient for the vehicle to be piloted conventionally. Then there's going to be situations kind of on the other end of the spectrum that are lower speed areas that don't have a whole lot of challenging components to them. And that's where we're going to start to see the fully driverless autonomous vehicles deployed much sooner. And that's, we've talked publicly about 2023 being when commercial operations for some of these fully driverless vehicles will begin. And that's going to be in a very constrained operating area, and then that will slowly grow. And the transition we've been talking about with the monitored autonomous vehicles, they may be on areas that our current fully driverless platform, we're not there yet to put it out fully driverless and be able to know that it's being driven with the utmost level of safety. And again, I just want to come back to that Motional, and we really take safety extremely, it's the number one priority for us. And so we're never going to have any of these vehicles be on the road that we don't fully stand behind. So there's going to be areas where we'll have these monitored autonomous vehicles where perhaps some of the newer software is being used, different platforms are being used. And then when it's been fully validated and we feel comfortable taking the driver out, there's going to be other neighborhoods that they will be fully driverless and operational.
Members, any other questions? All right. Seeing none, we will go to testimony. I thank you, too, for the presentation and for the conversation on this bill. Do we have anyone here in the room who wishes to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 288? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anyone here in the room joining us who would like to provide testimony in opposition for Senate Bill 288? And finally, is there anyone here in the room who would like to provide testimony in the neutral position on Senate Bill 288? Okay, seeing none, we will go to our broadcast staff and ask if we have anyone joining us virtually. I didn't see anyone sign up for the Zoom, but by telephone, who wishes to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 288.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 288, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in support.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone who wishes to provide testimony in opposition to 288?
To testify in opposition of Senate Bill 288, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 900. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Watkins, Watkins. Thank you to the members of the committee. I wanted to put on the record, while I appreciate the intent that's been stated on the record today from the bill presenters, unfortunately, on behalf of the Nevada Justice Association, we have to oppose this bill because the language does not accurately reflect that intent. There are 2 major components that we oppose the bill. The first has to do with the insurance requirements. The current law requires autonomous vehicles to have a $5 million insurance requirement. In this situation, it appears from the language of the bill that the insurance requirement would step down to $1.5 million when there is a passenger in the car, and even lower than that when the vehicle is quote unquote logged off. How an autonomous vehicle can be logged off from a platform is nonsensical, I believe, and the $5 million requirement for all autonomous vehicles should prevail. The second issue deals with proving liability and fault for an autonomous vehicle that breaks a rule of the road and injures somebody. Firstly, the safety engineer, despite what was said in the testimony, is not defined as the driver. Specifically, if you look to Section 4 of the bill, safety engineer is simply an occupant of the vehicle who ensures its safety. Secondly, in Section 22.7 and beyond, the safety engineer is distinct from the driver of the vehicle, and they are not the same.
30 seconds.
When we deal with liability, it's impractical to ask somebody who's been hurt to prove whether or not there was a manufacturing defect, a software glitch, whether there's safety engineer negligence, or whether there was hacking. There should be joint and several liability amongst all of the parties involved in putting the autonomous vehicle on the road, and the burden should not be on the injured party to prove otherwise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Watkins. We'll go on to the next caller wishing to provide testimony in opposition.
Vice Chair, we have no further callers in opposition.
Thank you. With that, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide testimony in the neutral position?
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 288, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, we have no callers in the neutral position.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make?
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Motional. Vice Chair Watts, I want to thank the committee for their time and thoughtful dialogue on this bill. I'd like to quickly just state that in regarding to Mr. Watkins' concerns, this is definitely a policy that he's been pursuing since his time in the legislature, and some good conversations in 2017 on a similar concept. I would just say that upending, the last 40 or 50 years of how our automobile insurance works is not, this bill probably isn't the vehicle for that. And I would also like to point the committee to the NTA's report to the legislature regarding the adequacy of insurance coverage and limits under statute for these types of vehicles. And I think that type of data from regulators is going to be critical to driving a more comprehensive concern that's maybe a little more focused on those issues and not the specific issue of safety engineer pay. So again, really appreciate the time and thoughtful conversation, and look forward to answering any of the committee's questions should there be any offline.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Walker. We've also appreciated the dialogue and look forward to having that continue on some of these issues. Also, I do appreciate the reference to the bill as a vehicle. I hope that was an intentional pun. With that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 288. and we will open the hearing on SB 383, which revises provisions relating to electric bicycles. Welcome, Ms. Fisher. You may begin your presentation whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. For the record, Susan Fisher with McDonald Carano, representing People for Bikes Coalition, which I explained earlier is an international organization, trade association for bicycle manufacturers, vendors, for both human-powered and motor-assist vehicles, bicycles. We appreciate Senator Harris and your sister committee on the Senate side for introducing this as a committee bill. The primary focus of SB 383 is to update Nevada statute to align the definition of e-bikes with 30 other states, with the federal government, and most importantly for us here in Nevada, with an abundance of public lands, with the Department of Interior. Electric bikes look like a traditional bicycle. If you saw one on the road or on the trail, it would be very difficult for you to tell the difference between an e-bike and a traditional bike. They have handlebars, brakes, shifting mechanism, pedals, just like a traditional bike. The three things that differentiate e-bikes are the motor, the battery, and the controls. There are two primary types of electric bikes: the pedal assist, where the engine kicks in as soon as you start pedaling and stops when you stop pedaling. And there's the throttle assist, where you have a switch to activate the motor and propel the bike even if you're not pedaling, and many of those also have pedal assist function. In terms of who rides e-bikes, it's very broad and the numbers on the roads are growing exponentially. Whether it's a beach cruiser, street bike, or even a mountain bike, they're gaining in popularity both for recreation and good, clean EV transportation. And they enable some people to be able to get out and about on bikes who may not otherwise be able to do so. The reason why People for Bikes Coalition is promoting this bill here in Nevada and in other states is because e-bikes were first federally regulated to establish safety standards. The reason the feds took the lead nearly 20 years ago on e-bikes, I didn't even know we had e-bikes 20 years ago, was to determine if they would be regulated like a bicycle or like a motor vehicle. If regulated like a motor vehicle, they would have been subject to the authority of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which governs cars, trucks, and motorcycles, or under the jurisdiction of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC, which is the agency that does regulate bicycles. Congress determined nearly 20 years ago that e-bikes should be regulated under the CPSC for product safety. After that, a lot of states started passing laws on e-bikes, but they were very disjointed, with some borrowing language from the CPSC, some not, and some states had very different standards on the speed and the wattage of the bikes. Where the federal law may have said 750 watts, some states may have said 1,000 watts cap. Our organization felt it would be helpful to riders, to your constituents, and visitors of Nevada to have consistent laws because of the portability of the bikes. So here's what the bill does. There are a few key things about the bill. The first and most important thing is that it defines the three classes of bikes in the market today. They're broken down by speed and method of motorized engagement. Class 1 is a pedal assist. You have to be actively pedaling for the motor to engage, and it goes up to 20 miles an hour. Now, when I say that it goes up to 20 miles an hour, obviously the bicycle can go faster than that. That's just how fast the engine can take it to. Class 2 has a throttle and can go up to 20 miles an hour as well. Class 3 is a pedal assist, and it can go up to 28 miles per hour. The top pedal assisted speed is not currently specified in CPSC law, so this aligns us with what is prevalent in Europe, that which is capped at 48 kilometers per hour, which is also the same as 28 miles per hour. Somebody else figured out that math for me because I don't do kilometers. And this gets us in line then with international standards. The bill incorporates the three-class system and provides additional guidance on where Nevadans may ride e-bikes. Our current statute doesn't address anything other than the standard rules of the road law, which you heard earlier today under SB 285. But current statute causes confusion for those who may want to but not know if it's allowed to ride an electric bike on a traditional bike trail or in a designated bike lane in a street. It includes some safety provisions for the higher speed bikes and references the correct federal standards. And finally, the bill adopts an appropriate labeling system for the three classes of bicycles. If you walk into a bike shop anywhere in Nevada now, On new bikes, you will already see that there are labels on the bikes. The critical piece in getting our statute in harmony is getting our statute in harmony with 30 other states. So we do have consistency, but also with the federal government and with our public lands laws. We reached out early on to DMV, which has advised us that the department has no issue with the bill. We also sent language early in session to Clark County, City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, City of Reno, League of Cities, and the Consortium of Cities, which represents cities of Reno, Sparks, North Las Vegas, Mesquite, and Las Vegas. DMV and Clark County responded that they have no issue with the proposed statutory change, and other local governmental entities provided no comment. So now, if you'd like, Madam Chair, I can walk you through the specific sections of the bill.
That would be great.
In existing law, 1, as it stands in Nevada statute right now, 1, it exempts electric bicycles from licensing and registration. We're not changing that. Existing law also does not require a driver's license and will not require it under SB 383. And electric bicycles are currently subject to the same traffic laws and other requirements as bicycles. But what we did, in short, any place in statute where the term bicycle is mentioned, we have added the term electric bicycle. Sections 1 and 2 delete outdated definitions of electric bicycles because our current statutes have not changed in over 15 years on electric bikes. Section 5, which is on page 2 of the revised version of the bill, identifies how electric bikes are to operate, for example, anywhere traditional bikes are allowed. Subsection 2 of Section 5 is enabling language for state or local governmental entities to prohibit use in certain areas for safety reasons, sidewalks, for instance, or if there are pedestrian-only trails where traditional bicycles are not allowed. We didn't want to tie local governmental entities' hands, but we also don't want them more restrictive of e-bikes than they are of traditional bikes. Subsection 3 of Section 5 also allows restrictions on unpaved paths or trails, as I just mentioned, and in subsection 4 of Section 5, a shared use path is defined. Section 8, which you'll find at the bottom of page 3, sets the age of an operator of a Class 3 bike at 16 or older and requires a helmet and allows for a passenger, and there's also a helmet requirement for that passenger. Section 9, which is on page 4, puts into statute the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission adopted equipment and manufacturing requirements. And this is where the stickers for all new e-bikes sold in Nevada must comply with those requirements. They may not be tampered with to change the speed capability or how the electric motor engages or disengages, and they must also have an operational speedometer. Section 10 lays out the 3 classes of electric bikes. As I mentioned earlier, Class 1, the motor provides the assistance only when the rider is actively pedaling and cuts off when the rider reaches 20 miles an hour. Class 2, you can sit back and enjoy the ride without pedaling, being solely propelled by the motor, but the motor stops when the bike gets over 20 miles an hour. And Class 3, the motor provides assistance only when the rider is actively pedaling and cuts assistance when it reaches 28 miles an hour. Section 14, which begins on page 6, is current statutory language defining recreational activity and limits liability for the owner of a property where recreational activity is allowed. In subsection 4H of section 14, we simply added the term electric bicycle to the list of allowed activities. And finally, in section 15 on page 7, describes the current prohibited actions against bicycles or other motor vehicles and adds e-bikes. And what we mean by that, in current statute, we have language that prohibits somebody from a car sticking a baseball bat out and hitting a bicyclist. That's just not allowed. And we're including e-bikes in that. And with that, Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know that we have a few questions, and we will start with Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Just a couple of questions, and I don't think you mentioned this in your remarks, and if you did, I apologize. But Section 8 that talks about the age requirements, I'm just wondering where that number came from, that 16 years would be the dividing point for a Class 3 electric bike. And I guess sort of concurrent with that, it sounds to me like really we're just talking about a few miles an hour difference between the different classes. So just wanted to get some more information on how that was arrived at and why the difference among the three classes.
Thank you for the question. Susan Fisher, for the record, it's simply model legislation that the organization has worked on in a number of other states and following what the federal guidelines are as well. 15 other states do have the age limitation for the Class 3 only, age limitation of 16. There are 3 states that set the age limit for the Class 3 bikes at 15. There are some that say, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that will allow kids under the age of 14 or up to the age of 14 to ride Class 3s. And then there are 4 states that have no age restrictions.
Thank you. And then as a follow-up to that, the provision says that no person under the age of 18 or 16 years may operate a Class 3 electric bicycle. So my question would be, what is the penalty? Is it a criminal sanction? Is it a civil sanction? What happens if an officer encounters a 14-year-old operating a Class 3 electric bicycle?
Susan Fisher, for the record, I cannot answer that question. I will have to get back to you on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the additional question. The last question I had was about the helmet requirement, and I think it's on page 4 of the bill, right around line 4 to 8. It talks about, a Class 3 bike and the helmet. I just wanted to confirm, hopefully you know the answer to this. I believe you have to wear a helmet in general when you're riding a bicycle. Is this just like a more sturdy helmet for the Class 3?
I'm smiling because I had a conversation with one of your comrades here yesterday about whether or not helmets, Susan Fisher for the record, whether helmets are required for bicycles. I don't think they are. It is required in statute, but maybe it is. Perhaps legal can.
I mean, I'm mostly asking because I wear one and maybe I don't want to, but I thought I had to wear one.
Because your mom told you had to.
Okay.
We are going to get back to you on that answer. Our legal is looking it up. I know as a mom, I require it of my children, but I don't think that it's required in law for a bicycle, a motorcycle, but not a bicycle. So while our legal is looking up that answer, I am going to go to Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope it's a law because I've been threatening my kids that they're doing something illegal this whole time. So I appreciate this bill. I appreciate the intent of it. I started an e-bike program at my previous employer with a colleague of mine, and it's been very successful. We really enjoy the use of e-bikes. And it's been used all over the valley in various government entities. Just kind of a follow-up to Assemblyman Yeager's question. So it seems like the 16 years of age would be a very arbitrary number. With the nature of a pedal assist bike, your limitation is due to your physical ability. So someone who could go 28 miles an hour on a pedal assist bike has to have the physical capability to do so. And so some 16-year-olds are not going to be able to do that. And some 14-year-olds may be able to do that, but their physical ability gives them the capability of going that fast on a bike. And so it seems like that number is arbitrary in effect, that it's accordance with your physical ability, and then your physical ability is really what's important when you're riding one of those bikes, as far as how you can control that bike. So that's just something that I have an issue with this bill. The other thing is the helmet. The helmet thing. I think that if it's good for one, it's good for all, or it's good, or we just don't tell people that they have to. We go with the nature. What's that? or we change it to from class 3 to all class of bicycle, no matter what, so that I'm not a liar to my children. And so I think that the provisions of the bill, defining what an e-bike is and putting it in statute is great. I just have a few issues with limiting the use of these bikes, having children under the age of 16 and thinking there's no way they could even touch that threshold of 28 miles an hour because they don't have the physical ability to do so. However, a class down, they're able to ride, and they may be able to go even faster on that bike versus another bike. So I just hope we can, find some common ground there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So really not a question, just more of a comment?
Well, can we find some common ground there?
For the record, Susan Fisher, I am more than happy to take your comments back to the bill sponsor and to the organization and see if there's some willingness to maybe put into statute to require helmets for all, or other considerations.
Thank you. Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, first of all, I appreciate some of the provisions that are in Section 5 of the bill as proposed, with the local and state authority to enact prohibitions for e-bikes on certain trails or paths if they think that is appropriate, as well as the subsection 3 that deals with trails. Although I see that it lists specifically designated as non-motorized. So the question I had is really related to those kind of single track trails. And there's two pieces looking at those two subsections. One is, of course, we have trails that exist on federally managed lands. And then I was just wondering around that verbiage around specifically designated as non-motorized. So I was just wondering if there's any additional clarity that you could provide on, particularly federal lands, or if there are trails that are not specifically designated one way or another, where bicycles are currently allowed, and that this would open it up to e-bikes, but they may or may not be appropriate, and how that may be handled.
Thank you for the question. For the record, Susan Fisher, as you know, since you hike, you've probably seen signs on a trail where it says no motorized vehicles. E-bikes would not be allowed on those trails, even if bicycles or horses are allowed on the trail. Certainly dirt bikes would not be allowed. If it's not designated either way, if you can use a regular bicycle and it's not designated that there are no motorized vehicles, then they can. I would suspect that because of the proliferation of e-bikes, that a lot of that signage is going to be changing over time to allow e-bikes, because it will allow people with physical limitations to be able to get out and enjoy those trails a little bit more as well. And they're quiet. They're not going to be any more disturbing to any wildlife or other people on the trails than a regular bicycle would.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I know there's a lot of conversation and debate around which trails should be open to use by bicycles in general as well as e-bikes. So appreciate the approach there, and just wanted to make sure that we have a process in place that's comprehensive. And it sounds like essentially governments at all levels are going to be taking this into consideration And as they do, the provisions of subsection 3 would work to try and keep them off of the places where it's not deemed appropriate. So thank you for the additional clarification.
Thank you for the questions, and I believe legal has an answer for the helmet issue.
Hello, this is Jessica Demmer with the LCB Legal Division. The 2019 legislature considered a Assembly Bill 187, which would have required parents and guardians to ensure that children under the age of 18 wore a safety helmet while operating a bicycle, scooter, and certain other vehicles. That bill didn't pass, so I believe that there is not a requirement in law to wear a helmet.
Thank you so much for the clarification. I appreciate it, and you are officially lying to your children, Assemblyman Levitt. Just get that on the record. We won't tell them, though. We won't let them know. All right, seeing no other questions, I thank you so much for the presentation. And we will go to testimony, and we'll ask if there's anyone here in the room joining us who wish to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 383. Come on up. And thank you so much. You've been patiently waiting all day long. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Moreno, Vice Chair Watts, for allowing my statement of support. My name is Wesley Harper, and I am the Executive Director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. The League is in support of SB 383 as amended, and we appreciate the work of the bill sponsors to bring this bill forward, and we appreciate the distinguished members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee for hearing it. We agree with the sentiments expressed by Ms. Fisher. This bill is a thoughtful response to the increasing popularity, advancing technology, and broadening capabilities of electric bicycles, and we sincerely ask for the committee's endorsement. Again, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your attention and for allowing my statement of support.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and again, thank you so much for your patience with us today. Is there anyone else here in the room who would like to provide testimony in support? Seeing none, is there anyone here in the room who would like to provide testimony in opposition for Senate Bill 383? Seeing none, is there anyone here in the room who would like to provide testimony in neutral for Senate Bill 383? All right, seeing none, we will move to our virtual platform. Do we have anyone joining us on Zoom who would like to provide testimony in support?
To testify in support of Senate Bill 383, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no, excuse me. Caller, the last 3 digits of 116. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Heather Fisher, H-E-A-T-H-E-R-F-I-S-H-E-R. And for the record, I'm calling from as a bike shop owner, as a tour company operator, as the president of Save Red Rock, and finally as a mother. I support this bill on all those aspects. As a bike shop owner, I can tell you that electric bikes are not only here to stay, but they are expanding faster than any other part of the market share. As opposed to other types of bikes that are also expanding, electric bikes are increasing exponentially because they are opening up an entirely new market. This bill is important to get out in front of the trend and create important safety guidelines that are easier to understand as it mirrors federal guidelines. As a tour operator, I've also seen a rapid increase in electric bike usage. From a tourism standpoint, electric bikes are important because they reduce the carbon footprint of recreation, they increase opportunities for people with disabilities, For example, someone who previously could only survive a scenic mountain drive in an automobile now has a choice to pedal up the hill without dying. E-bikes are helping to diversify the economy. The Las Vegas economy is suffering from a need for diversification as the population is trending towards less trust in the indoors and more trust in outdoor choices due to infectious disease concerns. This bill allowing electric bikes to be classified as bikes is economically advantageous to the Las Vegas tourism economy because people who might not feel comfortable in close proximity with a bunch of other breathers inside of a casino or a tour bus can now be more empowered to enjoy the healthy outdoors. As the president of Save Red Rock, safety is one of our founding principles. I liked earlier today in this meeting when I didn't get your name, but an assemblyman testified about the Don Alberts tragedy. That is why I started SaveRedRock.com in the first place in 2005. It was the impetus for the Red Rock bike lanes, the reduced speed limit, and the
30
Red Rock
seconds.
Legacy Trail. We are excited that the trail we've been working on for 15 years with BLM in Clark County is finally nearing the construction phases. We know that with the rapid expansion of electric bikes, that's going to be a big part of it. And we appreciate that this bill clarifies that e-bikes would be allowed on separated bike paths. It increases safety and actually ensures greater allowances for electric bikes on bike paths such as the Red Rock Legacy Trail because it classifies that electric bikes do not include dirt bikes, scooters, high-powered throttle engineered bikes.
Time.
And then finally, as a mother, my daughter loves her
Thank you
electric
so
bike.
much
She's only
for
9
your
years old.
testimony. Excuse me. Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm so sorry, but you have reached the limit for our testimony. If you would please provide your testimony in writing to our committee, I'll make sure that our members get it. And I thank you again for joining us. Next caller.
Thank you.
Chair, we have no further callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have any callers who wish to provide testimony in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Senate Bill 383, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition.
Perfect. Do we have anyone on the line who would wish to provide testimony in the neutral position?
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 383, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in the neutral position.
Thank you so much. Then I'll ask the presenters of the bill if you have anything to say in closing for the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Susan Fisher with McDonald Corano and People for Bikes. I just want to put on the record, I appreciate Ms. Fisher, Heather Fisher calling in to testify in support, and there is no relation. I didn't round up all my family members.
Thank you so much. Members, and with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 383. And that brings us to the last item on our agenda, and that will be public comment. I'll ask our broadcast staff if we have any individuals wishing to provide public comment today before we adjourn.
To offer public comment, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Members, that brings us to the end of our agenda for today. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, May 6th at 1:30. We did have our committee photo scheduled for that same afternoon, but we are adjusting that date, and as soon as I have the new date, I will let you know of that. To our staff here in the room and our staff that's helping us virtually, you are always amazing, and we truly appreciate you. And for everyone else that was joining us virtually and in the room, thank you for joining us today. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. I will see you all on Thursday.
Can we have your wife's phone number to see what else you're telling her that's not true?